Ridiculous fondling cardboard.
What is up? Welcome back to Fondling Cardboard. I'm your host, Mike Lakusta, aka the Golf Card Collector. And today is appearance number 6 of the legendary John Morton. John talks to us about a very important piece in his collection that he decided to let go. And he explains why it wasn't as hard to let go as you might imagine. And it is actually, in fact, an update on something John's talked about early on in the archives of Fondling Cardboard. So go back and check out those original episodes with John Morton from mid-2023. He talked about the introduction to vintage and pre-war golf cards, as well as a very interesting story about the holy grail of golf cards. Again, those are many months ago. Go check them out. Now, in terms of today, once we talk about that, we'll talk about why he wanted to sell it and what was the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that he was chasing and why he needed those funds. We talk a little bit about some historical artifacts like feathery golf balls and a bit of a teaser into the England card show and why it's unique to other card shows you might experience in North America. Without further ado, let's kick it to the conversation. John, what kind of projects are you working on? What's your hobby participation been in lately?
So I've been able to pick up a couple small things recently. One bigger thing, but and I'll detail those in a moment. But the big decision that I made recently, and this is tied to golf, but kind of not tied to golf. I outside of my golf collection, I also owned previously now. Owned a very historic document that was signed in 1795 by George Washington. It was an item that I took a great amount of pride in. I was very fortunate, very, very thankful and blessed to own that. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so American history, early American history, just sinks in a lot deeper for me personally. But I've owned that for a while now, and I had an opportunity about 3 or 4 weeks ago now to go after something in an auction that I really, really wanted from a golf history standpoint. And in order to be able to make a true effort to go after this item, I made the decision to sell my George Washington autograph, to be able to have the cash in my bank account, to be able to justify bidding as high as I wanted to bid, to make a serious effort to go after this item.
Man, I'm just gonna jump in and say, like, if you told me this offline, so I maybe can't have as genuine of a reaction as I'd like to, but I have such a mix of emotions hearing you talk about that because you and I had a great conversation early in the early days of Fondling Cardboard, and the significance of that document, the way you talked about it, I knew you were so passionate about it. Maybe it goes back to the concept that you can't own something forever. You know, you brought this document into your life and you're passing it on to the next curator. But yeah, I want to know more about that. Like, are you feeling any regrets about letting that piece go? What's going on? Did you use the money to fund the rest of your Scotland trip along with the money you made from the Cope set? Like, what?
Yeah. So the admittedly the money that I made from the Cope set, I've already invested in several major pieces in my collection, including the golfer's engraving that's behind me, that I acquired a number of months ago. But with the George Washington piece, it was a difficult decision to come to let it go, but I I ultimately didn't hesitate. And the reason that I didn't hesitate was because I knew that I would find a good home for it, firstly, but secondly, that the item that I wanted to go after was something that I would cherish even more. Now, the regretful part, the unfortunate part is that I didn't end up winning that item. So I did sell the George Washington. I had the cash in my account, and I have that available now. But the item that I wanted to go after went higher than and outside my reach. I'll put it that way. So I didn't end up getting it, sadly. But I don't regret selling the George Washington at all, because I made the absolute best effort that I could given the time frame that I had to be able to go after this one of a kind item. That was one of the reasons that I wanted to go very hard after it. Is it was truly a one of a kind item that would not have come up again in my lifetime. Whereas a George Washington autograph, while I cared for and took a great amount of pride in the copy that I had, the example of his autograph that I had, respectfully, I can get another George Washington autograph. I wouldn't have been able to get another version of this one of a kind collectible that I just lost out on. So because I made that best effort, I'm perfectly fine and don't regret the decision at all.
Fair enough. And ultimately, the George Washington piece was into golf themed artifact, so I'm okay when I'm watching John Morton as a collector, and I'm living vicariously with the amazing things you do in the hobby. I'm okay if you let that piece go, even though I really vibed off of your enthusiasm about it because I love seeing what you're doing in the golf world. I know you spent a lot of money getting that George Washington piece framed and in a very
Mhm.
high-end presentation. Uh, so you had an investment into the piece beyond just buying it. When you sold it, how was it valued? Did you make money on it? I'm not a play of the week kind of guy, but I'm just curious if you
Yeah.
anything to share about that.
Yeah, so I ended up pretty much breaking even with it at the end of the day, which I'm perfectly fine with. If I had more time, if I had properly sent it to an auction house or something, maybe I would have been able to make a little bit of money. Maybe call it 10% over what I had into the item at the most. But at the end of the day, as long as I was about to break even or roughly going to break even, that's all I cared about. That being said, I posted it in an autograph group that I knew would gather interest and intrigue. And I put it with a specific price that I knew myself I wasn't going to haggle on. So I had a limit for myself. Somebody wasn't going to be able to come in and start negotiating with me. I had a set limit, and if it didn't sell before the auction ended, or if it didn't sell at that price, I wouldn't have let it go, and I wouldn't have made a concerted effort for that item, and I would have been fine with it. Um, but roughly ended up breaking even at the end of the day. So
Well, and selling it through a group like that and being able to sort of vet out who you're interacting with gives you a bit of comfort because you know that it's going to be cherished by a similar collector to yourself. If you were to send it off to an
yeah,
auction house, maybe you could make a bit more money. And not that you have that connection to it once it's gone, but there is some solace knowing that another passionate collector who's on social media in this world is going to enjoy that piece for themselves. Um,
ab-
now,
absolutely. The guy that ended up buying it from me sent me a photo the day that he received it, and it got there safe and sound, thank God. But he hung it in his office, and he's photo, and it's hung next to a document signed by Abraham Lincoln. So it definitely
wow.
went to a good home, and is something that I was glad to be able to do because I know he's going to appreciate it for years to come.
Well, if the guy's looking for all the founding fathers, he might as well just get a document where they've all signed it together. But no,
Right.
it's pretty cool to get individual pieces. Um, I don't know if we're short for time, but I did want to, before I ask about what that card was,
Mhm.
because you referred to it a few times. You were chasing something big, a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I can't just let that slip. But before I get to
Yeah.
it, for the listeners out there who might encounter a similar situation, there is actually a service called card funding. And the one that pops to mind is called The Wharf Sports Cards. It's a consigner, or not a consigner, it's a consignment service, who I'm unaffiliated with it. I've no kind of compensation for shouting them out. But the guy Nick there, the owner, he's a hobby friend, and I like what he's got going on. It might not have helped John in this situation because I don't think he would be in the historical document world. But if you were purely a card player, uh, what he does is it's almost like a financing option. So if there's a card that you want, then they will go after it and try and buy it on your behalf. And if they're successful in doing so, you then have a period of time to pay them. And if you don't have the cash to fully pay it, you can send him cards because he's a consignment service and he will auction them off on PWCC or I think that's the main auction service that he uses. And he's done all kinds of conversations on the Stacking Slabs podcast, for instance, comparing the sales numbers he gets with PWCC versus eBay. Now, there is kind of a nice sweet spot in terms of the value of cards. You know, sending him in 20, 50, even $100 cards might not quite cut it. Like maybe the sweet spot is between $200 and $1,000 cards. But if you really are going after the grail, like John is about to tell us about, you know, and you happen to have half a dozen cards in that kind of price range, and you're willing to let them go, you don't have the cash, and you don't want to sell those cards, risking not, you know, sell them, and then you risk losing the auction, then you have nothing in your collection. That's kind of a nice option to look into. I don't know if there's anything like that for historical documents, but for our golf
Yeah.
card listeners, maybe that would work. Now, let's get to it, John. What was this once in a lifetime
What was I
opportunity
going
that
after?
you were chasing after that you missed out on, unfortunately? What was it?
Yeah, well actually are you able to allow me to share my screen while you're looking at that? It was an item in the latest antique golf antiques auction that was hosted by Golden Age Golf Auctions. Also, same auction house that I consigned my Copes golfer set to back in the April auction. And this was the first auction that they had done dedicated specifically to golf antiques. And there was an item in this auction that immediately jumped out at me. It's not a card. I'll preface it that way. So sigh of disappointment, Mike, but it's not a card. But this item that I went after and ultimately didn't end up getting is a golf ball. And it's a golf ball from about 1850, give or take. But what makes this golf ball unique and the reason that it was being auctioned off and it's so historical is that this golf ball was made by Alan Robertson and was played by Alan Robertson. So the same
Wow.
Alan Robertson that we just talked about earlier made this very feathery golf ball and actually played golf with it himself. It's the documentation, the provenance behind this golf ball is that strong that it is well known that this particular ball was made and played by the Alan Robertson.
What an
It's
incredible
got a
piece.
tremendous history and backstory behind it, but it's the only golf ball that's known that was both made and played by Alan.
Wow. I was about to ask if there were other copies of this, but if this is the only one, it deserves to be in a museum. Like who did the Museum of Golf History or someone win the auction or some
I
ridiculous
don't
thing?
know. I don't know. What I will say is that for my own peace of mind, I'm telling myself that the RNA must have outbid me.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, unbelievable piece of history here for anybody if Mike does post this. I'm sharing some photos from Golden Age's auction listing of the golf ball itself. But an unbelievable piece of history. And the thing that really sets this apart, that makes the story of this so unique, is that this golf ball was found just before 1900, and it was found inside the actual cornerstone of the R&A clubhouse in St. Andrews. The R&A clubhouse had been shut down to undergo some renovations, and inside the cornerstone were several artifacts that were placed there back in the early 1850s when the R&A Clubhouse was originally built and constructed. And this is one of the two golf balls that was found inside that cornerstone.
Now, I'm gonna show off my lack of architecture knowledge, but when you say cornerstone, do you mean like the tombstone or the foundation of a building, or what exactly is that?
The very first stone that was placed when construction began,
Oh,
literally and traditionally, the bottom of the very corner of the building, in a ceremony. It's a ceremonial thing, kind of like today. There's ceremonial breaking of the ground. Um, Earlier in society, it was common to have a ceremony for laying of the foundational stone, and that's what
interesting.
this was put inside of.
Well, thanks for explaining. I actually work in a field that involves building construction, and I was working on a project recently called Cornerstone, and now I understand what that really means. The architect was, or the owner was thinking about as they were designing this building. Although I think it's going to be like concrete slabs and wood frames, so I guess it's the first two by
Right.
four that they put in or something. I don't know. Maybe there'll be
Yeah,
a golf cart tacked to the side inside of the two by four, but. Wow,
there
what an
you go.
incredible golf ball. What a piece of history. Looks a little lopsided, so I don't know if I'd want to be hitting that on a par three if I were the winner, but
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't ever strike this with a golf club. I can promise you that. But yeah, sadly didn't win it. I'm telling myself it went to an even better home, which it obviously did. So excited for the winner, whoever that individual or entity is, but sadly didn't end up getting it.
well, when you say feathery, is it like a literal feathers packed into a compact core with some kind of animal skin kind of around, or what is it exactly?
You hit the nail on the head. It's literal feathers from usually cocks and hens that were used to be able to and stuffed into several pieces of leather and shaped in the form of a golf ball. That's how golf balls were made prior to, call it, 1850, give or take, is late 1840s is when gutty golf balls would have come into existence and featheries would have been phased out. But in their heyday, the best feathery golf ball makers, it was a very, very difficult process, labor intensive, but also unhealthy, dealing with the feathers. The best golf ball makers of featheries at the time could only make four or five, maybe six of those in a day. So it was very labor intensive. It took a very long time. And because of that, they were very valuable.
Wow, yeah, that's how many golf balls I lose in a day. So
Right?
I wouldn't have been too successful in the feathery era. John, thank you for sharing this. To wrap up, you mind sharing what it went for? Not what you were willing to pay, but like, what are we talking? Is this a multi-thousand-dollar item, obviously?
Yeah. So the final price after the buyer's premium that the auction house charges, final price ended up being just over $36,000.
Wow, you could have done a one-for-one trade with your 1900 Cope set, but I know
Right?
you already funded some other hobby. Uh,
If only this came up, 4 months ago, then
there you go. John, this has been an awesome conversation. We're probably running short on time. I know you probably have to run. But the last thing I was going to ask how the England card show went. I know you were there recently or not too long ago. Was there anything you wanted to share on that, or should we hit it on another time?
yeah, well, I'll tease it and we can dive into it a little bit more. So what Mike's talking about for those that may not know, back in April, in late April, I traveled over to England to go to their annual national card show. But it's very unique and very different from the national card show that we think of here in the United States. National Card Show over in England is entirely dedicated to cigarette and tobacco cards. And it was held in a small town about an hour and a half west of London. So I flew over on a Thursday night, arrived into London on a Friday, went to a couple different antique stores that I knew in the London area on Friday, and then went to the card show all day Saturday and Sunday. Incredible experience. I'll tease that there are millions of cards at this show.
Wow. Wow.
I ended up bringing home probably 40 or 50 after a weekend of shopping and searching and hunting through this card show. So incredible experience, especially for vintage collectors, early card collectors, tobacco card collectors. Man alive, was this a neat experience? But it's definitely worth a good half hour to an hour show by itself, Mike, so we can dive into it and I can explain all the details about how the show works, because
Well,
it's structured very differently than American card shows are.
can't wait to talk to you about it. It is yet one more thing on my list that I can't get to now because I've got a family and I love my life, but I'll have to defer that sort of adventure to another day. But I can live vicariously through people like John and others. I'm sure there's listeners who might be very interested. Sorry to keep you waiting to learn more about that, but reach out to John and learn more about the show if there's any way that the hobby connections can combine and maybe travel together, meet up. I really want to encourage that sort of hobby participation. Uh, John, awesome conversation. I think this might even be a 2 or 3 part recording that we'll release week over
Yeah.
week because there's so much we talked about. Thanks again. Do you want to do any shout outs anywhere people should reach out to you or any final thoughts?
Um, Excuse me. Yeah, again, really appreciate you having me on, Mike. Always great to see you and chat with you, and talk about golf and golf history and golf cards. Three of my favorite things. So, yeah, really appreciate the time. I'm very active on X, Instagram, and Facebook. In Facebook in particular, in Mike's golf cards and memorabilia group, as well as the golf memorabilia Facebook groups. So. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on within those groups on Instagram and Twitter. My handle is at John JOHN Morton MORTON 215. Same on both platforms. But yeah, reach out if you have any questions or if you ever want to just talk about golf cards, and golf history.
Awesome. Thanks again to our vintage and pre-war golf card correspondent, John Morton. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
These conversations with John Morton do not get old for me. I've really enjoyed having him on the podcast so frequently lately. And I can tell you, I guess I'm over the fact that he's got rid of his George Washington autographed document. Is it called autograph? If it was like a signature on a document, then maybe it's just called a signature. I don't know. Anyways, they're all autographs to me. A couple episodes ago, I referred to Mr. Alan Robertson and his significance in golf, and I hope today's conversation with John closes the loop on why that guy is somebody you should absolutely look into. Hopefully this is the last time I say it, because it's probably getting old, but I will continue to live vicariously when it comes to travels, when it comes to friends and hobby connections that are out there golfing their faces off. I've had a wonderful family vacation, and I'm spending time with my boys, which is chill sometimes, a bit chaotic at other times, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. Whatever you are doing in life, make the most of it, enjoy it, embrace it, because you won't get this time back, and time does nothing but march forward. Catch me on Instagram at The Golf Card Collector. Our Facebook group is Golf Cards and Memorabilia. I'll see you guys next week.
Ridiculous golf card collector.